My name is Camilla Harper, and for a long time I believed this was all I ever wanted. I worked hard, studied for years, and left home to follow a dream that felt so clear. I still remember the moment clearly. That morning changed everything for me, though I didn't know it at the time. I stood outside the tall hotel, holding my bag and my breath. It was my first day at work, and I felt a mix of fear and excitement. The air in Amsterdam was cool that morning, and the sky looked gray, but I did not care. I had studied cookery for 6 years. This job, in this hotel, was my dream. I had worked hard, passed every exam, and now I was ready to cook for real guests. I smiled as I walked through the glass doors. The kitchen was already full of noise. People were moving fast, carrying trays, cutting vegetables, boiling water. The head chef, a tall woman with sharp eyes, welcomed me with a quick nod and pointed me to my station. I was the junior cook. My job was to prepare vegetables, make sauces, and learn fast. I said hello to the others and put on my apron. Everything felt new, but I liked the speed, the smells, and the heat. It felt like home. My name is Camilla Harper. I came to Amsterdam from a small town in England. I left my family, my friends, and everything I knew to follow my dream. I wanted to be a chef in a big city, in a big hotel, cooking for important people. At least, that's what I thought I wanted. When I was in college, I used to imagine myself in a white coat, standing in a busy kitchen, shouting out orders, creating beautiful plates of food. And now, I was finally there. The first few weeks were hard. I made mistakes. I cut my finger once. I overcooked the potatoes another time. The head chef didn't shout, but she didn't smile either. She only looked at me for a second before moving on. At night I was tired. My legs hurt. My hands were red from washing and chopping all day. But every morning, I woke up early, ready to go again. I wanted to learn. I wanted to prove that I could do it. One evening, after work, I sat in my small room. I was too tired to cook, so I made a sandwich and looked out of the window. The city lights were beautiful. Trams passed below, and people walked fast, holding umbrellas. I watched them and felt a strange feeling in my chest. I missed home. I missed my mother's tea, my little brother's loud laugh, and the quiet kitchen at home. But I told myself this was part of growing up. Everyone feels lonely sometimes. I would get used to it. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. I got faster in the kitchen. The head chef started trusting me with more tasks. I was allowed to help with the meat dishes. One day, she even let me decorate the dessert plate. I was proud. I took a photo and sent it to my family. They were happy for me, but I could feel that they also missed me. My mother said, "Come home soon," but I smiled and said, "Not yet." The kitchen became my world. I worked 6 days a week. I didn't have many friends in the city. Sometimes I spoke to the waitress, Marika, during short breaks. She was kind and always tired, too. We talked about the weather, about guests, about coffee. It wasn't deep conversation, but it was something. On Sundays, my one day off, I tried to walk around the city. I visited markets, bought bread, watched boats in the canals. But I always felt like a visitor. I didn't feel like I belonged. One Sunday, it rained all day. I stayed in and cleaned my room. I found my old recipe book from college. I opened it and saw my handwriting, my notes, my drawings, my small dreams. There was a recipe I had written during my second year. It was called Mum's Chicken Soup. I smiled and felt a soft pain in my chest. That night, I cooked it in my small kitchen. The smell filled the room and reminded me of home. I sat down and ate slowly. I didn't cry, but my heart felt heavy. Things changed at work in the 3rd month. A new cook arrived. His name was Thomas. He was older than me and more experienced. He had worked in France, Germany, and Spain. He moved like he knew everything. At first, I felt small next to him. He was fast, confident, and always joked with the team. But after a few days, he started helping me. He showed me how to cut faster, how to mix sauces with more flavor. I listened carefully. He never made me feel stupid. One afternoon, the head chef asked me and Thomas to prepare the lunch for a special guest. It was an important businesswoman from the UK. We worked together side by side, focused and calm. The kitchen was hot, the plates were ready, and everything went well. After service, the head chef said, "Good job." It was the first time I saw her smile. I felt proud again. Thomas and I started talking more. During breaks, we shared stories. He told me about his time in Barcelona. I told him about my town, about my college, about why I came here. He said I was brave. I laughed and said, "Or crazy." He smiled and said, "Both, maybe." It felt good to talk to someone who understood the kitchen life, the long hours, the tired legs, the pressure to be perfect. We didn't become close, not yet, but there was a feeling of comfort. Still, something inside me started to change. I couldn't explain it at first. I still worked hard. I still learned new things. But the excitement started to fade. I didn't wake up with the same energy. The noise in the kitchen, the shouting, the rush. It didn't feel like magic anymore. It felt like work. I began to ask myself, is this really what I want for the rest of my life? One night, after a long shift, I walked home in the rain. I didn't have an umbrella, and my shoes were wet. I stopped by a small bakery that was still open. The woman behind the counter gave me a warm smile. I bought a piece of cake and sat at the window. People passed by with dry jackets and happy faces. I looked at my reflection in the glass and whispered to myself, this was my dream job. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. The next morning, I woke up early, as always, but something felt different. I sat at the edge of my bed, holding my cup of coffee, and stared at the wall for a while. Usually, I would jump out of bed, dress quickly, and get ready for another long day in the kitchen. But this time, I moved slowly. My body felt heavy, and so did my heart. Outside, the street was quiet, but my thoughts were loud. I walked to the hotel with my hands deep in my coat pockets. It was cold, and the sky was still dark. When I entered the kitchen, everything looked the same. People were shouting orders, pots were boiling, knives were chopping. But for me, the feeling had changed. It didn't feel exciting anymore. It felt like a machine, and I was just another small part of it. I put on my apron, tied my hair back, and started working. My hands moved out of habit, but my mind was somewhere else. That day, I made a few small mistakes. I added too much salt to the soup, then I forgot to label a tray of vegetables before putting it in the fridge. The head chef gave me a long look but didn't say anything. I cleaned up quickly and stayed quiet. I didn't want to talk to anyone. After the shift ended, I left the kitchen fast and walked home without speaking to a single person. I didn't listen to music like I usually did. I just walked in silence. Later that week, Thomas asked me to join a few others for drinks after work. "We're going to the small bar across the canal," he said. I told him I was tired. He smiled and said, "You're always tired." I laughed a little, but the words stayed with me. He was right. I was always tired. Not just in my legs or back, but deep inside. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. The following Sunday, I couldn't stay inside. I needed space, air, something new. I took a train to a quiet town outside the city. I didn't know the name of the place, and I didn't have a plan. I got off at a stop near a river and started walking. The cold air touched my face, and the wind played with my hair. I walked along the water, passing boats and old houses. I sat on a bench and watched the world go by. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. As I sat there, I thought about my old life. I remembered my college days when cooking made me happy. I used to try new recipes every week, write down ideas in my notebook, and dream about opening a small cafe one day. But in the hotel, I didn't dream anymore. I followed orders, moved fast, and waited for the day to end. I was learning, yes, but I was also losing something. I was losing the part of me that used to love food for more than just work. The next day, back in the kitchen, I tried to act normal, but something had changed inside me. Even Thomas noticed it. He said I seemed quiet, like I was somewhere else. I told him I had gone out of the city just for a walk. He smiled and said that was a good idea. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, you know." I looked at him. His voice was soft. "You're allowed to want something different," he added. I didn't answer, but his words stayed with me all day. That evening, I opened my old recipe book again. It was filled with drawings, notes, and old dreams. One page caught my eye. It was titled Warm Place Soup. I had written that during my second year of college. The recipe was simple: made with carrots, onions, a bit of ginger, and a lot of love. I had written a small note under the title. It said, "For the days you feel cold inside." I smiled and closed the book. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. The head chef asked me to prepare the special dish for next week's menu. It was a big opportunity. Usually, only senior chefs got to do that. She said she had noticed my growth and wanted to see my creativity. I nodded and said thank you, but inside I didn't feel excited. I felt nervous, even sad. This was supposed to be the kind of moment I had dreamed of, but I couldn't feel it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, why am I not happy about this? I got out of bed, made some tea, and sat by the window. Outside, the city was quiet. I saw the soft glow of streetlights, a few people walking, and a cat running across the road. I thought about my family, my mother's kitchen, my brother's jokes, the smell of baked bread in our home. I missed it more than ever. The next morning, I called the head chef and said I needed time off. She didn't ask many questions. She just said, "Take the time you need." I packed a small bag and left the city again. This time, I stayed in a little guest house by the sea. It was quiet, warm, and full of light. I walked on the beach, read books, and even cooked for myself. I didn't follow recipes. I cooked from memory. One night, I made the warm place soup. I sat alone and ate slowly, feeling more at peace than I had in months. On the third day, I wrote a letter to myself. I wrote about what I loved, what I missed, and what I no longer wanted. I wrote that cooking didn't have to mean pressure, speed, or noise. It could mean comfort, connection, and joy. I didn't want to work in a hotel kitchen anymore. I didn't want to spend years chasing someone else's idea of success. I wanted something simpler, something that felt like me. When I returned to Amsterdam, I went straight to the hotel. I found the head chef and thanked her. I told her I was leaving. She didn't seem surprised. She just said, "Good luck, Camila." I changed out of my uniform, walked through the kitchen one last time, and stepped outside. The air felt fresh. The sky was blue. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled without effort. Thomas was waiting outside. He had guessed what I was going to do. "So, what now?" he asked. I looked at him and said, "I don't know yet, but I'm sure I'll find it." He smiled and said, "I hope you do." I walked away slowly, carrying my bag, my recipe book, and a heart that felt lighter than it had in a long time. That evening, back in my little room, I wrote a new recipe. I called it First Step Cake. It had simple ingredients: flour, eggs, sugar, and a little bit of courage. It wasn't for the hotel. It was for me. And maybe one day I would bake it for others too. 2 weeks after I left the hotel, I was still in Amsterdam, but my days looked very different. I no longer woke up early to the sound of alarms and rushing footsteps. I didn't hear shouting in the kitchen or feel the heat of 20 ovens. Instead, I started my mornings with quiet. I made coffee, opened the window, and listened to the birds outside. I had no job, no schedule, and for the first time in years, no pressure. At first, it felt strange. I had spent so many years moving fast, always working toward the next goal. Without that, I didn't know what to do with my time. I tried reading, going for long walks, and writing in my notebook. I cooked simple meals just for myself. But even with peace and quiet, a part of me felt lost. I kept asking the same question over and over. What now? One afternoon, I walked into a small bookshop near my street. It was the kind of place I had passed 100 times before but never entered. Inside, it was warm and smelled of paper and old wood. I picked up a book about cooking from different cultures. On the last page, there was a quote: "Food is not just for eating. It is for sharing, remembering, and healing." I read it twice. Then I sat down and read it again. It touched something inside me. That night I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were busy. I sat with my recipe book, flipping through the pages. Each one told a story of my mother's kitchen, of college meals with friends, of cold nights and warm soups. I realized I didn't miss the hotel kitchen, the noise, or the big titles. I missed the feeling of connection. Cooking had once helped me feel close to others. That was the part I wanted back. The next morning, I had an idea. I posted a small note in the shared space of my apartment building. It said, "Free home dinner, Thursday night. I cook, you eat. Come if you're hungry or just want to talk." I didn't expect anyone to show up. I was nervous. I almost took the note down, but I left it there. On Thursday evening, I cooked all afternoon. I made 3 dishes: a vegetable stew, baked bread with garlic and herbs, and a warm apple dessert. I set the table with care. I didn't have much, but I made it look nice. At 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. It was a man from the 3rd floor. His name was Luis. He said he used to be a waiter before he lost his job. A few minutes later, a young woman from downstairs came too. Her name was Zoe. She was a university student and missed her mother's food. We sat together and ate. At first, it was quiet. Then slowly, stories began to fill the room. Luis told us about the restaurant where he used to work. Zoe shared stories from her small town. I listened, smiled, and served more stew. It wasn't fancy, but it felt real. At the end of the night, they both thanked me. Luis said, "You reminded me of home." That one sentence stayed in my heart. The next week, 3 people came. The week after that, 5. It became a regular thing. Every Thursday, I opened my small home, cooked with love, and welcomed whoever needed a warm meal and a place to talk. I didn't charge anyone. I didn't do it for money or for praise. I did it because it made me feel alive again. One evening, Thomas visited. He had heard about the dinners from a friend. He walked in, smiled at the smell of garlic and onions, and said, I knew you'd find your way. We sat together after everyone left, just the two of us and a plate of cake. He said he was thinking about leaving the hotel too. He wanted to teach cooking, maybe start something smaller. I said, "That sounds like a better kind of dream." We laughed and talked late into the night. Over time, the Thursday dinners became more than meals. They became moments of care, of laughter, of rest. I learned about different people, their cultures, their struggles, their joys. One woman said, "This is the only place I feel seen." Another said, "I haven't eaten with someone in months." Their words reminded me why food matters. I started writing again. I wrote stories about each dinner, about the people, the recipes, and the feelings. I called the collection Meals That Matter. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but it felt good to write. It felt like something true. My family back home was proud of me. My mother said, "You've built something special." My little brother said, "You should open a place and call it Camila's Kitchen." I smiled and said, "Maybe, one day." For now, I was happy where I was. Not in a hotel, not chasing stars or fame, but in a small room full of voices, stories, and warm food. 1 year after I left the hotel, I sat at my window with a cup of tea, watching the people walk below. The city still moved fast, but I didn't have to. I had created a small corner of peace. I had found a way to use my gift without losing myself. And I knew, deep in my heart, that this was still a dream, just not the one I had expected. Sometimes people ask me if I miss the hotel. I say no. I don't miss the noise or the long hours. I miss some of the people, yes, and the lessons I learned. But I don't miss who I was back then. I was chasing something I didn't understand. Now, I cook to connect. I cook to remember. I cook to live. And maybe that is what a real dream job is. Not a title, not a place, but a life that feels honest. A life that feels like your own. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share. More simple and emotional stories are coming soon.